did it.
After 3 days of riding through Germany and Denmark, we finally rolled off the ferry in Kristiansand. We had made it to Norway, just to get cut off by a coach. We didn't stay long in Kristiansand. Instead, we made our way directly inland to a small town called Vennesla, where a rather unusual but fun hiking trail begins, the Tomarena. This old timber flume, originally built to transport logs through the forest, now serves as a narrow footpath, clinging to the hillside and winding its way through the valley. It's fun walking inside an old hand-built timber slide surrounded by forest. You just hear your own footsteps on the wooden planks and the river. The evening sun cast beautiful shadows over the wooden slide, the valley and river. The rocky cliffs were lit up by the warm light. The flume curves and bends with the landscape above the forest floor, making every step feel like a little adventure. Due to the narrow nature of the path, we had to lean onto one side of the flume to let oncoming hikers pass. But the most intense parts of the hike were the bridges. Here, the timber slide hangs high above the river, suspended on steel ropes. This is sketchy! These bridges weren't exactly confidence-inspiring. They swayed, creaked, and moved under our feet, and the thought of someone coming towards us mid-bridge, not ideal. Fortunately, we didn't have to share those sections with anyone, which meant we could take our time, enjoy the thrill, and laugh nervously while trying not to imagine the whole thing collapsing beneath us. The walk was a magical experience, part history, part nature, part adrenaline, and it left us grinning from ear to ear. Our desire for more was awakened. It's a little bit windy and cold and it's evening, so now we will return to the motorcycles and then try to find a suitable spot for our first wild camping night. Wish us luck. After returning to our bikes, we headed out to find a place to wild camp. We were astonished by the beautiful South Norwegian nature. Everything looked amazing, but we had to drive for quite some while to find a suitable spot for wild camping. We arrived at the perfect spot on the shore of a quiet lake, but even though it was June, the temperature dropped fast after sunset, and the wind of the water made things feel even colder than expected. Luckily, we had packed warm clothes and thick sleeping bags, and the great view more than made up for the chill. The next morning we were woken not by alarms or traffic, but by sound of voices. We were a little bit shocked. Our first thought was that they would probably chase us away. When we went sleeping the night before, there was no one around. We opened up the tent and were greeted by some fellow Germans that offered us coffee. What a great way to start the first morning in Norway. After a breakfast with a beautiful view and delicious coffee, we packed up and continued on. Hello! It's day 5 of our Norway motorcycle trip. Very windy, as you can see, but beautiful weather. This morning even the tent was completely dry. It's just great. Our next goal, the small fjordside village of Lysevegen. On the way there, we found a huge waterfall that we wanted to take a picture of. In Germany, such a waterfall would be a tourist attraction. Probably you would even have to pay an entrance fee. In Norway, nobody even cared enough to mow the grass. That tells you one thing: Norway has a lot of waterfalls. To get to Lysebotn, we had to follow the Lysevegen, one of Norway's most iconic mountain roads, winding its way across a remote, high-altitude plateau before descending in tight switchbacks into the valley. The scenery up there is surreal. Vast granite rock fields and black lakes. This landscape makes you feel tiny, and the dark clouds really sold the threatening mood. It was rather cold up there, but we couldn't resist stopping to cook a quick lunch, even though the pasta we made was far from gourmet. Still, sitting there, eating warm food and staring out across the vast landscape, it was really perfect. And then we saw our first sheep. In typical Norwegian fashion, they just roam freely in the mountains, completely unfazed by traffic or weather. Some were laying right on the road, others just watched us from a distance, like fluffy mountain guardians. It was so cute. Because of the cold and exposed terrain, we decided to skip wild camping on the plateau and headed down into the valley towards Lysevegen. That descent is a ride I never forget. Hairpin after hairpin, carved into the sheer cliff walls, dropping quickly into a narrow fjord valley surrounded by towering rock faces. Lysevegen itself is beautiful, but wild camping there wasn't really an option. The valley is narrow and mostly used for farming, housing and so on. So we checked into the local campground, right as the rain started. We just barely managed to get the tent up before it really came down. Later that evening, we took out the tiny, cheap fishing rod we had packed. A €20 kids rod we had squeezed into the limited space on the bike. We stood by the water, full of optimism and zero knowledge, trying to catch our first Norwegian fish. And of course we caught nothing. The gear was terrible and so were we, but that quiet hour by the fjord, casting and laughing and being surrounded by millions of little flies, marked the beginning of our fishing odyssey. A storyline that would follow us through the whole trip. Willst du Mückenspray holen gehen?
Ich will auch ein bisschen filmen, wie die Mücken vor dir rumfliegen.
That night, the rain hit harder, hammering against the tent and reminding us that this trip was going to be just as much about endurance as it was about beauty. The next morning, the tent and gear were still wet, and we packed up early and made our way to Flume. But that's a whole nother story in itself, which we will tell in another video. Let's just say the hike was stunning, the stairs were endless, and we learned quickly that casual hiking in Norway is still very, very intense. After Flume, we pushed on, riding through steep valleys and along narrow roads. We spent the next night in Fjord, a peaceful little valley with beautiful water and a lot of wind. Sadly, here I realized that my skin felt and looked really inflamed. I just didn't know why. Later I found out I was allergic to my dry shampoo and it took a few days for my skin to recover. The next morning we left Fjord for our next big destination, Preikestolen. Hello. It's day 7 and we are at beautiful Fjord. We wanted to go kayaking here today, but it's windy and it's freaking cold, so we're not going to do that. We will just do a very, very calm day, recuperate a little bit from the hike in Flume from yesterday, and then drive to Preikestolen and just enjoy that beautiful fjord and the weather, which stopped raining, which is so great. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this very calm and relaxing day. We crossed the fjord by ferry, and while we were on board, one of the crew members gave us a tip. If you have time, take a detour along the fjord road. You'll get an amazing view of the cliffs surrounding Preikestolen from below. We did, and he was right. The view was incredible. Distant cliffs, blue water, it looked epic and cinematic. Finally, we arrived at the Preikestolen base camp. We cooked a little feast on the camping stove, maybe the best meal of the trip so far, and sat under the open sky, feeling proud and full. The only downside? There was no sink or dishwashing station, so we just left the mess for later. That evening, things took a turn. Our camping neighbors decided to burn incredibly wet firewood, which filled the air and our little house with thick, choking smoke. It was genuinely awful. Awful enough that I spoke up, which isn't something I normally do. After that, they put out the fire, but the damage was done. Ice burning, clothes stinking. We crawled into our sleeping bags early, partly because we were done with the day, but mostly because we had a plan. At 2:30 the next morning, we would wake up, pack our day bags, start hiking to the top of Preikestolen, just in time for sunrise. Will we arrive in time? Will the weather be good enough to see a beautiful sunrise? See for yourselves in our next video. Bye bye!